My name is Jerry Douglas, and I'm a musician most of the time. Half of the time, I just travel on buses and airplanes. And then when I get there, I get to be a musician. And I get paid for the traveling part. My first instruments, I remember dragging around the house from the time, you know, as long as I can remember, I was dragging something around, a plastic guitar. But I started playing mandolin when I was about 5. And my dad is a guitar player, so he was teaching me to play guitar. And when I was 6 or 7, I got a guitar for Christmas, but it was like a Silvertone, the cheapest model Silvertone. You know, it's like pushing down the strings was like a cheese grater, you know. And but I heard Flatt and Skaggs, then heard Josh Graves play the dobro, and asked my dad to raise the strings up on my guitar, which wasn't much of a stretch. And I learned how to, I said, I'll learn how to play like that guy, you know. Definitely Josh Graves was my first influence in the dobro world. And to get to meet him and be friends with him later on in life was an amazing thing, because he taught me really nothing about playing the instrument in person, but listening to him every day and trying to figure out how the dobro was tuned, because I didn't know anything about it, because I was in northeastern Ohio and he was in Tennessee, you know, and down south. And so there was no one to tell me anything about how to tune it, you know, any kind of techniques or anything like that. I knew there was a bar, and my dad had a banjo player, so we turned the first 4 strings are like a banjo, and then you have a high 5th for a banjo, a high root. But so we just finished it on off. It's an octave lower on the second 3 strings as it is on the top 3 strings, and so there was nobody to tell me what to do. So when I met him, he let me play his guitar. You know, I was about 13 years old, so it was like playing the Holy Grail to me, and I never ever forgot that. You know, that's a life lesson that you try to pass along. But he told me a lot about where he learned to play was by watching old black guitar players. And that's why he had so much soul to his playing, and that's what I really liked about it, was that he could play the really fast, really chromatic kind of like, but really the rolls and everything like a banjo, like Earl was doing. He could keep up with Earl, take the solos, but he was also, he brought this blues element to their music that they never would have had otherwise. And that's where he learned, you know, how to back vocals, and, you know, that's where all the soul comes from in his playing, and in mine now. Flux is my nickname, and it was given to me by Ricky Skaggs back in the early '70s when I was playing with a band called the Country Gentlemen, who were at the time like the cream of the crop of the biggest name in bluegrass music, you know, other than Bill Monroe. But it was sort of a cruel joke at the time, but then later on an old doctor came up to me, and while we were playing at a bar in Louisville, Kentucky, and this fella came up to me and he said, "Don't you know what that word means?" And I said, "Well, you know, I've looked it up in the dictionary, and it's to do with solder and making things smoothly run together, you know, making more fluid, you know," and I was sort of living off of that interpretation. And he said, "No, flux is a disease that killed entire armies in biblical days." So I thought, maybe I should change this. Maybe I should get rid of this. So I actually did, you know. Flux has come back since I've played with the Earls of Leicester. It's come back because there are guys in the band that know me from that time. I was playing in my dad's band at a festival, and the Country Gentlemen were also on that festival. And I was playing with my dad's band, and I could see different, you know, the 4 different guys in the Country Gentlemen. They were kind of scattered through the crowd. It was like being scouted by a football team or something. And they asked me right after that show if I would leave then and go on the road with them. But I had just finished my sophomore year of high school. I said, you know, I don't think I can. And I said, next year, on the break, on the summer break between my junior and senior year of high school, maybe I can do it. And I did. I went out with them and discovered that I wanted to be a musician. When I played in the Country Gentlemen, it was more of a traditional band, even though they were known as, they were probably the first newgrass band, you know, and took songs from different genres and played them. I mean, a lot of Bob Dylan's songs, you know, and all got them from everywhere. But the move to J.D. Crowe and the New South in 1975 was, I think, definitely a step in the right direction for my musical career, because I got to there. Tony Rice was there, great guitar player, and I learned so much from him and so much from J.D. Crowe. And Ricky Skaggs was there already, so I just kind of followed him into that job. And I learned so much and started to expand, you know, expand my horizons musically. And I became a student, more of a student of music at that point. That was a huge hurdle to get over. You know, I grew up in northeastern Ohio, like I said before, but in the mornings I was listening to bluegrass music, and at night I was listening to rock stations out of Cleveland. You know, a lot of heavy metal going on at that point. You know, in the mid '70s, and great bands. And a lot of bands. A lot of those guys came from Ohio. You know, Joe Walsh from up there, and James Gang, and all that stuff. You know, that was all coming out of Ohio. A lot of great bands out of Ohio. So I was confused. You mean, I loved all of this stuff, but wanted to try to figure out how to make it all fit together, and, you know, how I could play it all at the same time. But it took a while to create that mashup. Well, I first met Sam Bush. There used to be a festival called the Berkshire Mountain Bluegrass Festival. And I met Sam there, and with the original Newgrass Revival with Courtney and Curtis, and John Cowan was playing bass. And I was in Boone Creek with Ricky Skaggs and Wes Golding and Terry Balcom, Steve Bryant. And we just were the 2 bands who were the least traditional probably at that festival. And Sam and I were great friends right from the beginning. And then I met Bela Fleck later on, and when I talked him into joining Newgrass Revival. He was playing in a band called Tasty Licks out of Boston, playing bluegrass music sort of in his own peculiar way. But so those guys have been my buddies for forever, and we've evolved. We've all evolved together and separately on our instruments, separate instruments. And I think you know, just by having all the influences that we've had, the jazz influences and the rock and roll influences. Mark and Bela and I all owned houses all on the same street, and Edgar lived right down the street, and Sam lived just in the next neighborhood over. We didn't do a lot of touring, but you know, we were all great friends, first of all. And we loved playing together, and thought, well, we'll band together, and we did that at Telluride Bluegrass Festival every year. We were sort of the house band, and we still are. And I just did my 38th Telluride. We each wrote a song with the other partner in the band, and came up 5 people, 10 songs. It was great being in the studio, because we were in the studio with an engineer named Chuck Ainley, who was probably the best engineer in town at the time, one of the greatest engineers to ever hit that town. And his second engineer was Gary Pachosa, who I ended up working again with Alison Krauss, doing all the Alison Krauss records. Yeah, longest Alison Krauss and Union Station featuring Jerry Douglas was like, it hardly ever made the marquee. I came into Alison called me because they weren't sure if they were going to keep the band together or not. Adam Steffi, their longtime mandolin player, had left, and they didn't really know what they were going to do. So it was just sort of a shot in the dark to try, hey, let's call Jerry, and because I played on every one of her records. And we were close and still are. We have just great rapport. She's just little sis, you know. We started playing. I said, well, you know, we thought we'd try out 3 months. And the second weekend, they all got around me and asked me if I'd just stay. You know, we try this. It was a completely different direction. And with her voice and with a slide guitar behind it, you know, it gave it another place to go. But it was wonderful, and still is. Anytime we get together, you know, we're not traveling on the road together right now. It's not saying we won't, but you know, we've all kind of gone our different ways, and at this point, but nobody said, "Oh, we've hung it up." It's just, I mean, it's a sound that only those 5 people can make. Great gig, and musically, and you know, really good for the heart.